There is a question that serious historians have long considered, and that for equally serious reasons many have approached with care, not because the question is dangerous, but because it requires a certain discipline to hold two things at once: the historical record and the sacred tradition, evidence and meaning, what can be excavated and what cannot. This is not an inquiry into which religion is true or false. It is not a challenge to fight, to revelation, or to the spiritual traditions of any living community. Those questions belong to theology, and theology has its own methods, its own authority, its own kind of truth. What archaeology and linguistics can offer is something narrower, but not less remarkable: a history of how stories move, how they survive across centuries, how the oldest civilization on earth left behind narratives that would echo forward, transformed and deepened across millennia and across the fight that came to shape the modern world. What is the investigation we undertake today? Begin with creation. The Babylonian text known as the Enuma Elish, whose title translated simply as "when on high," is among the oldest cosmological narratives ever written. Its composition is generally dated to no later than the 11th century before the Common Era, though the oral traditions behind it almost certainly reach further still, deep into the heart of Sumerian civilization thousands of years earlier. The text opens in a condition of undifferentiated chaos, darkness, formless water, to primordial force, Apsu, the fresh water deep, and Tiamat, the salt sea, mingle to produce the first gods. Conflict follows. The young god Marduk defeats Tiamat, and from her shattered variations, the heavens and the earth. Human beings are shaped from the blood of a defeated deity created to serve the divine order and to relieve the gods of labor. Now consider the opening of Genesis. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. The Hebrew word translated as deep, Theom, is philologically a close cognate of Tiamat. Both words descend from the same Proto-Semitic root, carrying the same ancient resonance: the primordial, formless water that exists before creation begins. This is not a coincidence of sound. Scholars including William Vauxhall Albright and Frank Moore cross-document this linguistic relationship in careful detail across the middle decades of the 20th century. The ancient Near Eastern imagination, it seems, shared a vocabulary for the beginning of everything. But the meaning assigned to that vocabulary could not be more different. In the Enuma Elish, creation is the product of divine violence. Order is wrested from chaos through war. In Genesis, creation is an act of deliberate, sovereign will. There is no conflict, no defeated body from which the world is carved, only intention and light. Same imagery, radically different theology. The parallel that perhaps draws the most attention concerns the flood. The Atrahasis Epic, a Sumerian and Akkadian composition considerably older than its biblical counterpart, tells of a catastrophic deluge sent by the gods to silence humanity. One man is chosen to survive. He is instructed to build a vessel to take his family and the creatures of the earth aboard. The storm lasts 7 days and 7 nights. The boat comes to rest upon a mountain. Birds are released one by one to test the receding of the water. In the 11th tablet of the Epic Gilgamesh, the same story appears under a different name. The survivor is Utnapishtim. The sequence is nearly identical. In Genesis, the survivor is Noah. The architecture of the narrative, the vessel, the animals, the mountain, the birds, is the same in its essential form. When the scholar George Smith first translated the flood tablet at the British Museum in 1872, the reaction among scholars and the public alike was immediate. Here, in cuneiform, was a version of the flood story that predated the biblical account by centuries, perhaps by thousands of years. The academic conversation that followed has never entirely closed, but the most widely accepted scholarly explanation is neither miraculous nor conspiratorial. There was most likely a real catastrophe, a great inundation, perhaps the flooding of the Black Sea Basin, estimated to have occurred around 5,600 years ago, or one of the periodic, devastating floods of the Mesopotamian river valleys that left such a mark on human memory that its story survived, carried across generations in oral tradition, retold in the new language, inherited by peoples who were no longer in contact with its original source, and who made it their own. The same memory, many voices, thousands of years of distance between them. But here the analysis must be precise. To observe that the Abrahamic scriptures share narrative structures with earlier Mesopotamian sources is not to say that one borrowed from the other in a simple or diminishing sense. The history of literature, sacred and secular alike, does not work that way. What scholars describe is a process of theological reinterpretation. A civilization inherits image and narrative from already embedded in the imagination of its world and fills them with entirely new meaning. The difference between Atrahasis and Noah is not a matter of names. In Atrahasis, the flood is an administrative decision made by gods in conflict with one another. The survivor is saved almost incidentally, cause one god chose to defy the others. In Genesis, Noah survives because he is righteous, because of a moral relationship with a singular, purposeful God. That shift is not cosmetic. It represents a fundamental reimaging of what it means for the divine to act in history at all. In the Enuma Elish, human beings are created as servants, willed to ease the burden of the gods, to freedom for labor. In Genesis, the human being is created in the image of God, given dominion, given responsibility, given in the oldest sense of the word. Significance: same story, different universe. The history of ideas does not move in straight lines. It moves the way rivers move, carrying sediment from places long since left behind, depositing something new at every bend, continuing forward in directions that could not have been predicted from the source. The Sumerians who first shaped this narrative didn't know that their words would outlast their civilization by thousands of years. They didn't know that stories about floods and creation and the first human being would be woven into the scriptures of fight they could never have imagined. Fight that would eventually be followed by more than half the people alive on earth today. They wrote what they knew, what they feared, what they believed about the world they inhabit and the force that governed it. And those words were carried forward through Akkadian, through Babylonian, through the long and fractured transmission of ancient Near Eastern culture, not as text to be copied, but as a set human vocabulary, a set of images and questions that every civilization in its own time had to answer for itself. How did the world begin? Why does suffering exist? Can a single person, in the right moment, for the right reasons, survive the end of everything they have ever known? These are not Sumerian questions. They are not questions belonging to any single tradition. They are the question civilization as when they are serious about being civilizations. The answer changed, the question never did. And something in that continuity across 4,000 years, across languages that no longer have living speakers, across fights that would not recognize one another, suggests that the questions themselves may be the oldest thing we have.